Hello, folks, and welcome to our presentation today, Cloud Migration for the IT Professional. Our presenters today are Dave Bailey, President, and Phillip Jackson, CIO of Arctic IT. We've designed this content specifically for the IT professional. Our goal today is to help you develop a cloud strategy to bring to your leadership team that will transform your organization. Dave and Phil will show you step-by-step how to harness the power of the cloud. As a reminder, you've got the A team on this call today. If you have a question, please put it in the chat window, and we will try to answer as many questions as we can at the end of the presentation. Also, there is a short survey at the end of the call. Your feedback is very important to us as we develop our next series of webinars. So please share with us your specific needs. With that, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Dave.
Hello, thank you for joining us today. Hope everybody is healthy and safe from their homes, and in some places of the country getting back to whatever the new normal is. As you might imagine, cloud adoption and understanding and migration of the cloud have definitely been a little bit accelerated, if you will, in the past few months. We have a two-part series. We did a Cloud 101 presentation because a lot of folks know about the cloud, they have some preconceived ideas or notions about it, but as a non-IT professional, some people are intimidated by the questions they might ask, or they really don't know the type of questions. So we did an education series on, hey, this is the cloud, this is what it looks like, this is how it works, this is some of the options there. But at the same time, we got feedback as well from some of the IT professionals that we work with that they're having trouble translating the value of the cloud or how or why it works to their leadership. So we said, well, I think we can probably address that. So we have good attendance today from what we can tell, some IT professionals or in that leadership space. So we're going to dive in on some of the tips and tricks on the kind of messaging you have to bring to leadership as an IT professional to get done what you think you need to get done. And then at the same time, we're going to take you on a little field trip out to two Microsoft environments. I have my shotgun partner, Phil Jackson, with me, our CIO at Arctic IT, and he's going to show us actually spinning up an Azure server. And then and before that, I'm going to show you kind of what the Microsoft 365 portal looks like and some of the different attributes that have been added to it recently, in case you're not familiar, and that might spark some questions. So with that, we'll kind of jump in. Again, selling the value to the management. What are the steps of migrating to the cloud? I think many times as an IT professional, we can see the forest through the trees. In other words, we know the things we have to do to get things up into the cloud, but we have to find a logical way and a visual way to explain it to our leadership so that they understand that this is a process. It's not just a switch that we flip. Some cloud migrations are pretty quick, but most of the time, the planning and documentation and understanding of how we got there or why we made the decision is overlooked. And if you ever get called into question of why was this put in the cloud, why wasn't it put in the cloud, and you didn't follow those steps, you can, as an IT professional, you can be caught in a bad position. You should always remember that you have to be defensible about cost and value to the business for an IT solution that you put in place, regardless of where you are in that IT organization for the company. We're going to go on that little field trip and then a little call to action to get you thinking about what you can do next and how we might be able to help. So first things first, the cloud is not a destination, it's a capability. We like to talk about that because most people think I'm putting myself someplace else, but it's not just the location of what you put in that cloud environment, it's a capability that it extends, whether it's additional security, management, reliability, some of these other aspects. A few years back, I had to explain to my father that the cloud is on the ground, right? It's just data center somewhere else leveraging the economies of scale, and the term cloud is applied. So when we think about what leadership is looking to manage, right? No matter what kind of business I'm in, whether I'm a state and local government, a federal government, a for-profit commercial enterprise, healthcare, it doesn't matter whether I'm a tribal casino or a tribal government, which we do a lot of work with as well. I'm always looking to manage my expenses. I want to have speed, but I understand that there's typically a cost associated with speed, so I have to understand that relationship. Utilization. If I can get more utilization out of a piece of technology because of where it's located or how it's consumed, well, that means that I'm getting my money's worth out of it, right? Reliability. If I'm constantly having to deal with outages as a leader inside an organization, I'm going to look to my IT department and say, listen, I can either depend on it or I can't. What's my service level agreement with my own internal IT department? And then what kind of services can we deploy in the cloud that might help that service level agreement from you to the rest of the company, from a vendor to us, right? So there's some math there. And then management. If I have peaks and valleys in my business, right now, a lot of us, big valley, right? If I'm in the cloud, I can turn down how much I'm spending. I can throttle down how many compute cycles and how much energy I'm actually putting into my services. And then as my business starts to pink back up, right? Like hopefully it's going to happen soon for all of us. Well, then I can dial that requirement back up. If I'm not in the cloud in that situation, I have all these on-premise capital investments. They require the same amount of energy, whether they're being used or not, if they're on. I have storage, and when I buy those assets, I don't want to, if I need 100 gigs of storage and 16 gigs of RAM to process something, well, I'm not going to just buy for that. I want to capitalize on that asset over the next 3 to 5 years. So I might buy 600 gigs of storage right now and 64 gigs of RAM, but I'm not going to need it until a longer period of time. So that scalability and that management capability, the cloud is a big difference, right? And then redundancy. Really important to understand redundancy. There is local type stuff where I don't want to have just one power supply. So if you've been building servers out over your IT career, dual power supplies, dual network cards, additional storage, different levels of RAID, RAID, right? Redundant array of inexpensive disks. Right? I've always had to think about that as an IT professional. But if I put that into a cloud environment, I can start with what I need and virtually add capacity as my needs grow. There is no greater scalability and affordability than the cloud provides in that context. And then the biggest one, which I typically will save for last, is security. As an IT professional, security is almost the first piece of every discussion we have. The end user will come to you with better, quicker, faster, what's in it for me, right? But security is something that we have to be able to answer better, quicker, faster, what's in it for me with first. Where is it located? How do you access it? Is that session or that use of the technology encrypted? If you're working on a laptop like I'm speaking to you from right now, is the data I have on that, is it secure? Is it encrypted locally at rest? All these different conversations pop in. Now, on premise, you can do all of that. You can manage all of those things that I talked about for security on premise. But you have to have a tool that manages that for each one of those aspects of security. When you go into a cloud environment, that same cloud provider, whether it's Microsoft or Google or AWS, Amazon, it doesn't matter, they have the ability to take that same tool, but minimize the cost over 10,000 units, while you have to maybe use it across your 1,000 units. And they get the value of the economy of scale. And you as a subscriber to that cloud environment, not only can make yourself more secure for less money, they're also monitoring it better, and they have a much bigger thing to lose than you, market share and brand. So they're not only defending your information and your data and the security of the information you put there, but they also have to be cognizant of all their other clients and what a negative impact having a breach would have on their brand and their cloud. So they have a little bit more of a motivation. Not that you're not motivated to protect your stuff, but as an IT professional, leveraging the economies of scale and minimizing risk and also offsetting it. Keeping in mind as an IT professional, there's no such thing as 100% secure. There's not. And someday I hope that that's the case. But the reality is that there's always somebody working just as hard as you are to keep stuff secure as they're trying to get into the stuff you're trying to protect.
Yeah, Dave, and I think a lot of times people focus really on the expense of this. You know, they're like, oh, well, what does it cost? There's so much more, as you just mentioned, that the cloud offers you. It's the agility, it's the security. I mean, how many of us have redundant generators and multiple locations spread across the US and all of this redundancy and the ability to scale up and scale down? And so it reminds me, I'm going to show my age here. I put in an email system. So I was around when email systems were just coming out, and I went to the CEO and I made my pitch for the email system. And he's like, well, this seems like it's an awful lot more than postage stamps. Like, it looks like my postage costs are only X dollars, and what you're proposing is, 3 or 4 times X that. And it's because he didn't see the value in email. He just saw it as like, oh, I'm exchanging postage stamps here. And I think when you think about bringing your stuff to the cloud, you have to think more about than just changing postage stamps here.
It's not just about the expense. Absolutely. All right. So one of the things that we like to touch on as well is the types of service that are available, right? So there's public cloud, hybrid cloud. We're strong believers in a multi-cloud, maybe not having all of your eggs in one basket. Some of the larger clients that we work with, well, they have a pretty robust data center. They might be in a line of business that requires them to have a good amount of their business application and the data they need to operate right there local with them. An example would be a medical clinic or a hospital, right? If they lose internet, they still need to be able to access patient charts, medical records, and information right there local on the spot. So they got backup power, they have local resources. However, if anything was to happen to those, in almost all hospital situations today, medical facilities, they have near real-time cloud backup of that technology. So that if they ever have to go mobile, if they ever have to transfer medical information to another hospital, or they have a temporary outage, they don't lose that critical information and have to rely on an on-premise resource to restore it, right? So there's lots of different things there. Same thing with maybe a tribal casino, right? Or any kind of casino. They have real-time play happening right there, depending on burst bandwidth, internet connection. You want to guarantee that experience for that end user. You want to guarantee the availability of whatever they're investing in at that time. But the cloud offers the redundancy and backup. So software as a service is a very common aspect. It is in fact the most common aspect of cloud utilization. In our Microsoft world, we talk about something called Dynamics or Office 365, where I no longer have to buy, a physical disk and put it into a computer to load my software. I'm going to download it from the cloud. I'm going to manage that subscription there. I pay whatever it might be, $100 a year, and I'm always on the latest and greatest version of the software, right? Then you have platform as a service, where I may need to take some of that server infrastructure and put it up into the cloud. And then depending on your industry, infrastructure as a service, where I actually want to carve out a piece of a third party's data center and I want to put that stuff in there. A lot of time, even a seasoned IT professional, when they get up out there in that cloud marketplace, determining or figuring out what has the best business value and positive impact between software as a service, platform, or infrastructure as a service is a conversation they need help with, because they may not have ever extended themselves outside of that on-premise data center that they grew up with. This is some industry standards and statistics for you to show that cloud applications as a service, or SaaS, is by far the largest adoption and growth marketplace for the cloud. And it's interesting, not necessarily from a consumption perspective, but if you're an IT professional and you have a responsibility to talk to your leadership about why it's important, what the industry trends are, you have to have some credibility to back up other than you just walking into that office and saying, hey, it's important, or hey, I think it's a great idea. You have to be able to show this kind of data, right? So this was on a blog that Phil had done a couple months back.
Yeah,
but it is definitely one of the bigger aspects. Software as a service, if you think about it, is not much different than the electricity of years and years ago, right? Years and years ago, we had manufacturing plants that were generating their own power, and they'd have their own steam turbines and everything to generate the electricity that the plant needed to make electricity for what it was manufacturing. And the only thing you were getting delivered is fuel to run your own generator. And if you've ever had the opportunity to read a book called The Big Switch, really good book, they talk about that industry and how pretty much, from geological times, I guess it's pretty much overnight. But it's interesting that one guy said, you know what, I'm putting out so much electricity, I don't necessarily have a way or a good way to store it. I'm going to start selling my surplus. It became so popular that he stopped manufacturing what he was making and just put in more steam turbines and started selling the electricity to the other manufacturing plants, who then took out their steam turbines to increase the amount of manufacturing space they had, and electricity as a service was begun. You may recall a guy named Thomas Edison who capitalized on that. As a matter of fact, the power company in New York City here, where I'm not too far out of, is still called Con Edison today. I don't know where the con comes out of. A lot of people say it has to do with the price of electricity.
When I found out that we weren't going to have to manage Exchange server when the cloud was coming, I was like, where do I sign up for that? So that software as a service kind of lets the people that work on my team focus on other things, and lets Microsoft focus on the things that's kind of become a commodity, and that's kind of email. Like, nobody has the best email system in the world except Microsoft. So let them do it.
Yeah, that's good. Let people do what they're best at, right? So we talked about what that cloud migration model looks. This is an Arctic IT diagram that our creative marketing folks helped Phil and I put together. It's a 9-step process. So as an IT professional, if you're going to go to your leadership to say, listen, we want to move a few workloads, one workload to the cloud, this is why. You should be able to show them that this is the footprint that our environment has. This is the storage capacity and processing power that we need. These are the cloud options and potential costs. This is what it looks like if we're to migrate and when we'll realize or capitalize on that investment. You also have to know a little bit about business to be able to say, well, currently this workload is a capital expense because it takes money to invest in hardware, software licensing, maintenance, all that stuff, capital expense. But as soon as I move that to a service, that becomes an operating expense. It becomes easier to budget. It becomes a more dependable cost structure, right? So there's less variability, less maintenance, a couple different things. You have to be able to quantify that value. But once you get all that in place and leadership gives you that thumbs up and they ask you, okay, well, once we say go, what happens? You have to be able to show them a picture of that as well. First, we're going to prepare the environment. Then we're going to set up some of the configuration and move some of our data into it. Then we're going to test it and make sure everything works good. And everything works good, and let them know that they'd be part of that decision process. Then we're gonna launch that rocket. We're gonna send it into production, right? Go through the rest of it and make sure that they know that now it's something that you still have to take care of. IT doesn't have to work at it on premise. Now they have to focus on it in the cloud. Still requires maintenance, still requires attention. Pictures are worth 1,000 words. So this deck will be available for you as well. A lot of us, if we're in the IT space, we have diagrams like this where we've set up different configurations as it's evolved over time. This is the kind of information you have to be able to talk to leadership about. What's the use case, the business case? What are the dependencies? Business impact if we don't do this, business impact if we do. Financial impact, right? Business and financial impact aren't the same thing. Will my product that I'm making, will my business be relevant 3 years from now if I don't make this investment? Is different than it's going to cost me X if I don't do Y, right? There's different conversation there. Then you want to be able to show dependencies. Now, depending on your leadership's IT maturity level, and this isn't a stone at them because they have you, and you're supposed to be the expert in the IT space. But you do owe them the ability to show them a picture. Make a simple diagram. Say, this is what we have today. This is what it'll look like going forward. Map some dependencies. If you're trying to sell them on the fact that I'm going to move to the cloud and I'm going to get rid of these 3 physical boxes, show a picture with those 3 physical boxes to start with, and then the next picture is those boxes don't exist anymore. So what did I get rid of? What did I get rid of? I got rid of the hardware, the software licensing, the maintenance, the electricity, the backup, the redundancy, all that stuff I had to have on premise. I just put it up there for 1 monthly charge, right? So then we talk about recommendations from optimization, right? This is a picture of the Azure Calculator. I'm going to take you out to that on a little partial field trip here in a short amount of it, but you have to be able to show cost. It's never been easier to figure that out. If you know as an IT professional that you have a box right now that's doing a workload for you, and you know what's in it and what dependencies it has, how much storage, processing, compute power, you can go right into the calculator and drop that stuff in. Sometimes you have to make some translations and you might not know what all this is about. So I'll talk to you a little bit about that. But going into Azure and coming up with a price to just simply replace exactly what you have now with the scalability you need down the road without spending the money ahead of time, very easy to do. And then you want to come up with what that migration plan is going to look like, right? You have to weigh some of the options. If I go into the G Suite, like the Google Cloud, or I go into the Amazon Cloud, or I go into the Microsoft Cloud, well, I'm going to still need storage. I'm going to need server operating software. I'm going to need some business application software. Well, if I go into AWS, I'm just going to pay AWS for the cloud environment, but I'm still going to need Microsoft licensing on my servers. But if I go over to the Microsoft Cloud, I can get both bundled into the same cost for less money. So how do you compete against those things? And Amazon might have a better plugin. They might have some kind of promotion on the amount of storage. If you're very data rich and you have a tremendous amount of data, you might find some economy of scale with storage over there versus a Microsoft environment. But as an IT professional, unless you're like us, we've drank a lot of Microsoft Kool-Aid. That's where we spend most of our time. We have some resources that we move around between AWS. You do have to be able to cost justify between the options out there. You think about health insurance or something like that. There's more than one health insurance company. Every year, your business leadership has to go out there and say, well, these are our insurance options. This is the quotes that we got back. This is why we're going with this one. It's not the most expensive. It's not the cheapest. It's in the middle, but it also has the best coverage for the price. Cloud environment's the same way. So you have to apply that same thought process. Phil's going to take you out to show you how it would be to set up your own Azure resource in that environment, which is pretty neat. And this is where, as an IT professional, you're going to go out and you're going to manage some of those cloud resources that you have. So it's just like going to manage a server that you had right in front of you in your room, in your server room, right? But now it's just in someone else's data center. And then you want to do that migration and test. Check things out, set a baseline for yourself so that you know where you started and where you end up as you evaluate things. Move to production. So we get to a certain point, we have our confidence level goes up on this is going to work. We've tested it, everything's cool. Send it. Put it up in the cloud and start using it. Most of your end users aren't going to know the difference. And then it's always important to go around and do a quality assessment and a security review. You built and assembled base with a security baseline, right? But go back after you go live on a good frequency, at least once a quarter, twice a year, and make sure that that security is in place and the same justification and reasons you use to move are still in place for that cloud resource. Right?
And Dave, these tools are excellent. I mean, Microsoft constantly refreshes their recommendations. They'll go in there and tell you, hey, do this to make yourself a little more secure. You can see those secure scores, they fluctuate as changes in your environment happen. And it's just a great tool, again, adding to the value that the cloud brings. It's just not one thing, there's a lot.
Yep, that's a good point. And there's plenty of monitoring out there, and then maintenance tools. And you got to look at what's available. Here's a tool that goes out there and scans all of your cloud resources and tells you whether or not you're getting the value out of it, whether you're getting the utilization versus what you're paying, or you have the wrong subscription here. You should be using something less expensive because the user you've assigned this license to isn't using everything that you've provided to them with that license. Lots of cool tools out there today to help you make sure that once you move that investment to the cloud, you're actually getting what you expected out of it. More importantly, you're getting what you told your leadership you were going to get out of it. And that's what you have to always maintain. A lot of IT professionals that we come across, they made the migration to the cloud, that's great. But now a year later, when budget cycle comes around, their leadership saying, hey, how are we doing on that? Where's the business value? Is it what you said you were going to be? Don't tell them, hey, it'll take me a couple of weeks to get that data together. Don't be that guy. Don't be that lady, right? Have that information. Always have that at your fingertips. If you're not constantly looking at the fact that you're getting value out of that investment, then you sold it under false pretenses, right? So make sure you have that always in check. So there's that 9-step process, okay? All right, so let's go on a little field trip. I'm gonna start out by going over to something called Microsoft 365. We have another slide on this too, which I'll talk about. For those of you that have been following the Microsoft branding and the different iterations that it goes through, Microsoft now calls Office 365 Microsoft 365. And there's a couple different flavors of it depending on the size of business. So small business, medium enterprise, large enterprise, different SKUs or products, if you will. I have a sample environment that I use as kind of my sandbox. It's called Cyber Parachute. It's a little make-believe world that I use for demos and education and things on cybersecurity. So this is my tenant for my make-believe business, right? And I log out there and I immediately see a couple different things that I can go into from a normal end user perspective. But then immediately, as an administrator, right, and best practice as an IT pro, I'm going to have my daily driver account, and I'm also going to have an admin account. Those should be different accounts. You should never have administrative privileges to your cloud resources with your daily driver account. You should always have a separate account with what you would consider just-in-time credentials to log into those resources. Always use multi-factor authentication so that your phone gets a code on both accounts, right? So just a little best practice for the IT professional. So when I go out here, I click on that admin tab, and that brings me right out to this environment. Immediately, I'm presented with a home page, which is going to show me some information here and some different steps that I can go to. Pretty small environment. It's just Dave's world. Not a lot of users in it, but I can immediately go to my users. It's going to show me a list of my active users, right? You'll see my admin account, which is the chef, and then my daily driver account, which is Demo Dave, right? It's as much fun as they let me have, so bear with me. I'm logged in right now as my admin account, so I can see all that stuff, right? There's things like guest users and then things that we call deleted users. Deleted users still stay in a list. They're still an object. You really never want to delete anything out of your environment because it's a record that you want to keep, right? Security roles, resources, billing. I can look at my services, my licenses, my bills and payments, payment methods, depending on how I buy my licensing. I can log a support request. I can set up different settings about the subscription if I'd like. And then I get into some more administrative type functions like the security and compliance components of the software. One of the big aspects of people that when they don't have a big footprint in the ground, or a big footprint in the cloud and all their assets are on the ground, How do I have that identity and that authentication process? I want to make sure I manage my identities across all the different devices that I have. So whether it's a laptop, a phone, a tablet, anything, anywhere, any device, anytime is what the cloud can provide to you and your business, right? And you got to remind that to your leadership. As an IT professional, you got to say, listen, there's a reason security is not just important because of what you see in the press. The way we work is different. We work differently today. And security has to precede everything that we do. And if I don't have the ability to do that with all the tools that we have on the ground, the cloud is my best chance because it gives me a top-down approach to look at how everybody's using information in one place versus having a bunch of devices come up through the internet and down into a VPN into my on-premise world. This is a lot more difficult to manage than my cloud resources. The way we do that is with something called Active Directory. So the same way you signed onto your computer to watch our presentation today, hopefully you got on a little bit before that because you're staying productive at home. You have a username and password, and then that has a subscription in Microsoft's environment assigned to it. But that identity can be applied to all the different aspects that I use inside my IT space. I can even use my Azure Active Directory or my user account in my business to access Google. I can use it to access AWS. Microsoft's Active Directory Identity Service is the most widely used identity service on the planet, not just by a little, by 1,000 times. It is one of the best identity services that is available to anybody in that IT space. All right, so inside my subscription, I can come out here and I can look at the different users I have. Keep in mind, I might have Active Directory accounts for different resources, like that admin account might not even exist over in Office 365 for some Azure resources that I have. So it gives me a way to not only manage my business application or SaaS users, but all my platform and my infrastructure as a service accounts, I can manage those separately in AD, right? And then I have something called my security and compliance, right? So this is my home page, right? You'll see here that my secure score inside my little sandbox here is 77 out of 228. Don't assume that when you have 77 out of 228, you're in bad shape. The reason mine's low is because the only thing I actually have is an identity in here. I don't have any data, devices, apps, or infrastructure, and there's no data there. So because there's no data and there's nothing to score, the top score versus how many points you have is a statistic. You have to be able to explain statistics, especially to your leadership, because if you let the wrong one fly, you'll defend it for the rest of your career, right? So there's everything out here on that security and compliance. This is just part of Microsoft 365. Alerts, permissions, classifications. I can look at threat management. It'll show me different types of attacks that have happened on my tenant. It'll tell me where they're seeing the most threats, particularly against my domain if it was connected, right? So a lot of great visibility to the different services that I have inside that Microsoft environment. And then the last one here, I'm going to just go to the Azure Calculator. And it's immediately going to bring me out to azure.microsoft.com. Right? And as an IT professional, if you've never procured something in Azure, this is just a little bit of an idea on how you can go out there. You can play around with this tool, can't break anything. You don't have to buy anything. This is completely free. All you got to do is go out there to azure.microsoft.com and put in calculator, right? First thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and I want to set up a quote for a virtual machine. So I have an on-premise server, and I want to go ahead and I want to throw it up in the cloud. How much would that cost me on a monthly basis? So I scroll down after I pick VMs. I might be in the West region, I might be in the East region, I might be in Central, and it makes a difference. Keep in mind that if I'm sitting here on the East Coast and I put my Azure virtual machine in a data center in the West region of the United States, it's going to work. I'm going to be able to access it. It's not a problem, but the best performance that I get is going to be 3,000 miles closer to me here on the East Coast. You still have internet capacity and latency that you would have to consider where you place your resource. Granted, that kind of stuff has shrunk down over the years, but there is regional availability. Not only that, but if I'm going to set up here in the East region, right, Eastern US, I want to set up my fault tolerance for my backup service, probably in the West region. If I'm in the West region, I want to set up my fault tolerance on the East region. Why? I got 3,000 miles separating me from things like weather, different effects of who knows what, whether it's an earthquake or a hurricane, or it could be even a pandemic, right? So East region, West region makes a difference where you're physically located and maybe the impact something might have from a geospatial perspective. Operating system, I'm going to pick Windows. Type, I can just have the operating system. It might just be a server with an operating system. I just want to get on it. Maybe I want to use it for some type of application service. But if I wanted it to be an actual like database server, I don't actually need to stand up the server, then put the operating system, then load the SQL software to it. I can just tell the cloud, I want to stand up a database server with SQL on it already, and it bundles it together. For demonstration purposes, I'm just going to go operate OS only, operating system only. I can have a basic machine, low priority, or standard. For today's presentation, we're going to do standard. Default instance. Here I have two processors, two virtual CPUs, 8 gigs of RAM, and 50 gigs of what we call temporary storage, keeping in mind that it's storing it there and then we'll offload it as it needs to, depending on how I set up the virtual machine. That's at 19 cents an hour. 19 cents an hour. And that's calculated on 730 hours, which is the equivalent of 24/7, 30 days, right? 24/7 times 30 days. All right, now, as you see here, I can start to pick different types of machines. So Phil, I'm going to go down here and I'm going to pick a D16S with 16 processors, virtual processors, 64 gigs of RAM, and 128 gigs of temporary storage. That's going to cost me $1.50 an hour. I can do that as a pay-as-I-go. If I want to reserve that amount of compute power for 3 years, they'll give me an 80% discount. Well, I don't know how much space I'm going to need for 3 years, but I'm at least going to take a 70% discount and use a reserved instance instead of paying, pay as I go.
One thing that's new about that, Dave, is you can trade some of that in. So as long as you're committing to some Azure, so oops, I got the wrong one. It's a little slow, and they will let you trade up and in as long as you are committing to a Azure resource.
Yep. So there's lots of flexibility there. Now, if I pay up front, I can do that. Or I can pay monthly. I'm going to do monthly because I'm just stepping in, right? I'm not quite sure. This is how much I'm charged. If I went up front, this is what my average per month might be, right? Then I have managed disks. So here I can tell it what kind of disks I actually want to use. This is going to say what kind of hardware. Depending on what I'm using it for, this might make a difference. If I have regular hard disks, spinning disks, that's a little cheaper. If I want to move to solid state drives, premium or standard, right? I'm going to go with standard solid state drives, and then I get to pick the kind of drive space I want to use. For me, since I know that I don't need that much space, I'm going to go with the 128 gigs for $9.60 per month. That's what I want to do. How many disks? Well, this is no different than if you're building a server in your own environment. I want to go ahead and say that I want 5, okay? 5 disks. Now I have storage transactions. If I was doing something like a retail web commerce server, or I had a bunch of web hits, if it was public facing, depending on the kind of technology I was going to deploy, I might want to up this. But even if I wanted to up it to 100,000 transaction units, which is 100,000 times 10,000, right? Still cost me $200 a month. So what they're saying is they're not going to throttle me up until that amount, because if I start using a lot more, they're going to have to charge me more. It really is pay by the drink, pay by the sip. Support is included. I get a licensing program from an online services environment. I don't need dev and test pricing, but I might. So right now, my monthly cost is, let's just call it $1,120 a month. So for a smoking brand new server with plenty of storage, right, I'm looking at $12,000 a year, give or take, maybe a little bit more, $13,000 a year. And I don't have any licensing. I don't have any hardware costs. I don't have to have any space in my rack. I don't have to maintain the physical aspects of it. If I want to use snapshot technology, if I want to back it up, right? Even adding a snapshot. As an IT professional, if you had any SAN devices or a storage area network that you put in over the years, being able to create snapshots changed your world, right? Adding a snapshot in the cloud, $48 a month. That means that I constantly have the ability to go after a snapshot anytime that I'd like, right? Size of the snapshot, I'm typically probably not putting more than 5 gigs a day into that. I can calculate that. 66 cents per month to have that snapshot. So here's my storage, here's my snapshot. And that's just an example of how the calculator works. So with that, Phil, I'm going to make you a presenter here. So let me change presenter to you, and you can show folks in the Azure world what spinning up that server might look like. All right?
Great.
There you go.
Great. So I'm going to follow on with what Dave was doing some pricing, and now he says we're good to go, and I would like to actually spin up a virtual machine. And so what you're looking at right now is the Azure Dashboard. Just so you know, for your information, if you've never used Azure and haven't ever signed up for an account, Microsoft makes that easy, and they give you $200 worth of credits to go out here and kind of kick the tires. So as an IT professional, you might go out there and just kind of see what's all available to you. What's amazing to me is the breadth of services that are available. We're not going to walk through them all today. We couldn't, if we took the rest of the day, we couldn't get through all of them. But you can see down the side all of these services that are made available to you with just a few clicks. Everything from AI to blockchain to compute to storage to web, mobile, the identity Dave was talking about, all of that, all of these services, and they add more, it just seems like every single day. So there's lots of services that are available out there to you. But we're going to start with a simple one, just a virtual machine, and try to spin one of those up for you. So you can see right now I don't have any virtual machines in my environment. If I did, they would be all listed down the side along with kind of what their status was, where they were located, all of that kind of stuff. So I'm going to come up here and say add. And it's going to walk me through a series of questions. And you're going to see those are very similar to the things that Dave showed you during the pricing mechanism. So the first thing is a subscription. It's asking me what subscription I want to put this in. You can have multiple subscriptions. Think of subscriptions as billing units. So I might want to put, you know, all of one business unit and one subscription, and another business unit and another subscription, or you may want everything in one subscription. It's really not so much technical as it is a billing kind of thing. The resource group is just a group of resources that you want to group together. So maybe there's a set of web server that connects to a database server, or a bunch of NICs attached to a server or storage. So you're just wanting to group those kinds of things together. Here, I've already got a resource group created, and I'll call it webinar. It's asking for my name. Now you want to just adhere to whatever naming conventions you're using. And then remember, Dave was talking about that region. So here's that region tab. And I was also going to talk about that and let you know the same thing that he did. One is you want to pick a region that's close to you, geographically close to you, if possible. Obviously, if you're distributed around the United States, you'll be, you know, you'll want to pick something kind of central. You can go out here and look and see where all the Azure regions are. So I brought that up just so you can get an idea. They're all over the world. They're also showing you where they're going to deploy new regions. Within regions, there is availability. So if you want to think availability zones, so let's say Microsoft has a region on the East Coast. They may have a set of servers or a server farm data center in New York, and they may have one down in, say, North Carolina. That would still be considered the East. It's a whole region of East, but then within there are data centers scattered, kind of a little bit geographically disparate, not maybe in the same city or next to each other. And so that's what this is asking you is, do you want some redundancy around your availability? I'll say for now, I don't need any redundancy. And then you can see, I think sometimes Microsoft had gotten the rap of just, only Microsoft services. But you can see right here, it's asking me if I want an Ubuntu server. I really don't. I'd rather do Windows. But you can see I have lots of options here available to me, including just a Windows Pro box. I'll do Windows Server 2019 Data Center. And you can see there it's going to give me a standard size, and I can go in here and click change size. And when I click change size, I'm going to get that same link that Dave got a while ago that shows me different pricing and different for different kinds of machines. So you can see what the cost is, how many CPUs, how much RAM. So let's go down, just select that one. It's going to take me back to this. So it's asking for a username for my admin account. Call it Mr. Admin. It's a password. Put that in. If you're an IT professional and you're familiar with using RDP to manage your environment, by default, it's going to ask you if you want to open that so that you have a way to manage it. When you spin this up, you're going to need a way to manage it. Obviously, that's not a good security practice from a go forward perspective, but if you just need something to kind of manage it, to bootstrap you up, you might want to do something like just-in-time access later inside of there. Now that's all that's really required. You can see here it asks if I already have a Windows license. Yes, I do. That will save me on my cost. I confirm I have a Windows license. And that's all that's really required. If I hit review and create, it's going to spin that up. I want to walk through just a few more of the options so you can see again how that pricing thing that Dave shows you dovetails with actually creating the machine. Here I can choose SSD or spinning disk. So standard HDD is the spinning disk, but I want standard SSD. Notice that data is already encrypted at rest by default with Microsoft services. So you don't have to worry about that. And you can bring your own key if you don't want Microsoft to have the key platform generated. You can bring your own key. Here I can create data disks. So remember Dave was talking about the temporary storage. Here I can create a brand new data disk if I wanted to around that and create as many as I want, just like the pricing calculator had. So it's asking me what I want for the data disk. I click OK. Now I've got a gig of premium SSD on the data disk. Networking, we won't have time to go into all of those, but you can see you can assign a public IP. You can have what subnet you want that. If you need a load balancer in front of it, all of that can be configured right here. From the management side, one thing I just wanted to draw your attention to really quickly, you notice that when Dave showed you things, it was charged by the hour. Well, maybe I just need this on during business hours. I can enable auto shutdown right here. And so now I'm not charged. Like Dave mentioned, it's pay by the drink. So as long as it's not running, I'm not being charged. And then here's that backup. So how easy is it to turn on backups? Just click it, click where you want it to be stored, where you want it to be stored at, and that machine will be backed up automatically. Finally, there's tags. And so if you want to tag things as SQL servers or regions or business units, I mean, it's just like tags in anything that we use today. You can create as many as you want and tag your VM however you'd like. once you're all done configuring all the options, and remember, we could have just configured the basic. We didn't have to go through all the rest of the tabs. We could have just click create. And so it goes through and tells me, hey, what's this going to cost me? And what are all the options that I picked? And just confirm that that's what I want to do. Once I hit create, all the hard work is being done for you right now. The server is being spun up, the OS is being laid down, and within a matter of minutes, you would see a server out here available for you to connect to over the public IP, ready to go. And so it's super easy to create these test environments and see what Azure is all about. And then I think, Dave, you've talked before about just trying to pick maybe small footholds in the cloud that you could go to without, you don't have to move everything at one time. And so you can find something that you want to move and get you a little bit of a foothold out there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's when you think about it as an IT professional, if you don't have a lot of resources in the cloud, and some of this stuff can be daunting, and if you don't have the time to play around with it, get your hands on it, touch it, understand how it works, and really digest that cloud environment, it makes you less effective when you actually have to go to something with production. So one of the cool things is that you can go out here inside your Azure environment, you can do test subscriptions, you can use some of your free consumption and go out there and build some of these boxes and get a feel for it before you actually need to do it.
All right, well, I will make you presenter again, Dave, and let you finish up.
All right, very good. Okay, so I'll come back over here. One of the, as Phil was just pointing out too, let me know that you can see my desktop, Phil.
Yep.
Yeah, there's all types of stuff out here. For example, if if in your free time, you like getting your nerd on a little bit outside of work for the daily stuff that you're responsible for, and you want to learn some new things, one of the cool things you can do is come out here, say you want to learn more about artificial intelligence and machine learning and Internet of Things. You can actually set up an AI instance and point it to some of your production stuff as an IT professional and start to see some of the AI that the system will pick up. Like, did you know that from this hour to this hour, there's only this many people using these kind of resources, yet you have them still running 24/7, right? Little things like that. Artificial intelligence can give you insight onto the utilization and money that you're spending. You heard Phil say that, and you heard me say that you only have to pay for what you use. And I think that's where Liberty Insurance may have gotten the commercial from, only pay for what you use. But the cloud has been doing that a long time. Think about the current situation we're in with COVID-19. If I had a large business with a large infrastructure and a large data center, or a small business, either way, if it was all on premise and I needed to keep it operational so that it stayed alive, or I had to manually shut things down, those capital assets, that hardware, that infrastructure is all still sitting there as expense. It's all still sitting there. If I had more of my assets in the cloud and I could dial down how much I use and how much I spend, my costs were like this before I hit the situation. And if I was in the cloud, I could actually drop my costs during this outage. And then when I came back up, I can dial them back up. That's the power of scalability. And that's the one thing as an IT professional would like you to leave with today, is think about the effects of where cloud subscriptions can really benefit your business. And how do you get those workloads to there now to prepare for what they're saying we could deal with this again. So if we have to deal with this again, how much more prepared could we be based on some of that knowledge of what the cloud can provide, right? So that's really important. So move on to our next slide here. If no matter what your maturity level is with respect to the cloud and understanding its value, if you need help coming up with a strategy, or you want to help have that conversation with your leadership, but you're not quite sure on what the right resources are going to be, Arctic IT is offering a free 2-hour technical conversation with professionals significantly deeper in expertise than even Phil and I. to help talk to you about what that strategy might be. At least get you started and point you in the right direction. Doesn't have to be with us, doesn't have to be with Microsoft. We just want to help the community take advantage of this so that they're in a better position to react. If it's something that you want deeper assistance with, of course, we're interested in that as well. But let us know. If you want to reach out, connect@arcticit.com is the best way to get in touch with us, okay? If you didn't hear earlier, Microsoft 365 is now what that whole Microsoft product suite is called. It includes the Windows 10 operating system, updates and patches. It can even include the Windows 10 enterprise software for your machine if you go to an enterprise SKU. All the Office applications that you're familiar with, Word, Excel, Outlook, PowerPoint, those are the Office applications, both install on your device and the web app access. Exchange hosted, and several different advanced threat protection security suites along that Microsoft stack. So if you have questions about that, you're not quite sure how that translates into the new world, again, connect at Arctic IT. Our marketing team will make sure that we get the message and get it answered for you. Now we'd like to open it up to some questions.
Great. Thank you, Dave. That was fantastic. Thanks, Phil. We'll give it a few minutes, wait for some questions to come in. But in the meantime, I'd like to thank Dave and Phil for hosting this, our last in our cloud technology webinar series. It's been great to have our A team deliver these great presentations for our clients and colleagues. So thank you.
I see one here, Joanne, that just came in. How long does it take to migrate to the cloud? Well, that's a pretty generic question, but it's a reasonable one. Depending on the workload, whether it's a business application, data, it's going to vary. So your mileage may vary is your safest answer, especially from an IT professional perspective to your leadership. If you use that 9-step process, you should have an understanding of how long. Usually the longest process is coming up with that testing and migration strategy. So I have something on premise, I'm going to move it up to the cloud. How long is it going to take to get the end users to test that it works as expected and make any changes that I have to? That's usually the longest stretch. Coming up with the how, the why, the how much, that stuff should move pretty quick. And as you can see, there's plenty of tools to help you get it done pretty fast. Any other questions, Joanne?
No other questions.
Okay, well, we're right at the top of the hour. We like it when a plan comes together. That was an A-team joke if you didn't get it, by the way, anybody. So thank you very much for your attention and your audience. Any additional follow-up, connect at Arctic IT is the best way to get in touch with us. And we bid you a good day. Stay safe and stay healthy.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us.